Welcome back to your daily bedtime stories. Tonight's story is The Wolf Watchers, a true life adventure story by Alison Hood and Claudio Zalero Zubiri. As the first rays of the dawn sun began to warm the chill night air of the Ethiopian highlands, Kibero, the young she-wolf, yawned and stretched herself awake. She looked around. She could see that most of her family had already started the day. This year's litter of pups were busy filling themselves with the warm milk from her mother Juno. Her father, Jupiter, the pack leader, was exchanging morning greetings with the other wolves, and the den was filled with the sounds of snuffing, squeaking, and swish of wagging tails. Kibero shook the dust from her glossy red coat, and joined in the morning ritual grooming and began being groomed by other wolves in equal measure. Jupiter began to howl, and one by one the rest of the wolves joined in the chorus. With eyes closed and muzzles pointed skywards, the strange choir voiced the eerie, beautiful wolf song, announcing the start of a new day, just as they had for generation upon generation down the long years of their history. The wolf's song carried far in the still morning air, down into the valley and the tiny village far below the den. But the villagers did not look up in wonder at the sound of the ancient song, for many did not care for the wolves and all they stood for. They tolerated their presence in the mountains, but they were suspicious of them as a possible threat to their sheep and cattle. They did not understand their ways, their sense of family, and their love for one another. Back at the den, Kibero had stayed behind to look after the pups while the rest of the family went hunting. Like the other wolves, she loved to roam the wild plateau that surrounded their home, hunting for choice morsels to bring back for her family to share. But she also looked forward to puppy-sitting her younger brothers and sisters. Next year she would be old enough to raise her own litter, but for now she was content to watch her siblings play, staging mock fights, pouncing on unsuspecting insects, running and jumping and rolling in the dust until they were exhausted. This play was essential for their development, helping to strengthen their muscles and tune their senses as they learnt how to become adult wolves. The pups were too young to be alert of danger, but not Kibero. Always she remained constantly watchful, alert to any threat. So when the great tawny eagle wheeled silently across the sky, she was ready, pushing the pups into the safety of the cave. Standing at the entrance, Kibero remained tense, for besides the eagle she could sense another presence on the otherwise deserted plateau. Far away on the distant ridge, Kibero finally spotted 3 figures on horseback. Her body stiffened at first, and then relaxed, for she had seen these people before. At first she had been afraid, for seldom did humans mean well when it came to wolves, but over many months she had learned that the strangers meant no harm. If anything, they were a nuisance, these wolf watchers who seemed to have nothing better to do than stare at Kibero and her family. As the sounds of their voices drifted across the plateau towards her, Kibero turned back to watching the pups. The moment of danger passed. But if only Kibero had been able to understand the humans' strange language, she would have soon realized that a far greater danger than the eagle lurked in the plateau. A danger that threatened not just her and her family, but all of the wolves of Ethiopia. From far away on the ridge, the 3 scientists watched Kibero and the pups with concern in their eyes. "It's great to see you so well and happy," said Claudio, "but I'm still worried. Too many other packs are falling ill." It's only a matter of time before the rabies spreads here too, added his colleague Karen. Yes, came a third party member, Edris, sadly. If we don't act soon enough, it'll be too late. Tomorrow we must meet with the village elders again, said Claudio. Without their cooperation, our plan to save the wolves will never work. The wolf watchers turned their horses around and left Kibero in peace. They knew all too well the danger that threatened the wolves' peaceful existence. Rabies, a devastating disease, has found its way into the village, into the wilderness of the mountains, and the wolves had no defense against it. For centuries the wolves had lived in isolation on the plateau, but the arrival of the domestic dog used to herd the village's cattle had brought the killer disease into the very heart of their homeland. As the wolf watchers rode back to their camp over the open grassland, Juno, Jupiter, and the rest of the pack were busy going about their daily routine, oblivious to the danger that lurked so close by. The first task of every morning was to patrol the borders of their territory and remark the boundaries. The older pack members knew how important this was. But the less impatient ones began to desert the group to concentrate on the fun of hunting. Unlike their northern cousins, the grey wolves, Ethiopian wolves hunt alone. For they're not after large animals that need to be run down by a coordinated pack. Instead, they prey on mole rats and grass rats and small creatures that needed to be trapped by stealth and careful, patient searching. Jupiter, the pack leader, knew better than anyone else where the best and fattest mole rats could be found. He could sniff out their burrows and then had the patience to wait for his prey to come to him. When the mole rat finally appeared out of its hole, Jupiter would freeze, leaning forward, alert to every scent, sound, and movement. Timing his tack to perfection, in a split second he would pounce, grabbing the plump meal in his mouth. Today, Jupiter had made an early kill, which pleased him. But something else was making him feel uneasy. Sensing danger, Jupiter dropped the prized mole rat and lifted his head to sniff the air. He knew the scent of a dog, and that was what he could smell now. He had seen dogs with cattle and the villagers at the waterhole, but they had always avoided each other, so what was one doing up here, far away from the cattle herds in the village, right at the heart of the wolves' hunting ground? Jupiter was confused and nervous, tensing his muscles in readiness for an attack. He could see the dog now, trotting towards him across the grass. But something seemed wrong with it. It was limping and lopsided, and even from a distance Jupiter could see that it was shivering. Its eyes were terrible and red, staring not at him but somewhere in the distance. As Jupiter watched in bewilderment, the dog's tongue rolled from side to side and saliva frothed over its lips. The dog thrashed its head from side to side, growling and snapping at imaginary flies. Jupiter flattened himself against the ground and watched its every movement. He was afraid for himself and for his family, for he had seen other dogs act like this, and other wolves, and he knew that this strange sickness eventually led to death. Suddenly the dog arched its back and leapt at Jupiter, clawing at the empty ears. The wolf rolled quickly aside. Jupiter had no intention of fighting this particular foe. Instead, he thought only to lead the mad dog as far away from the den as possible. So he ran off in the opposite direction with the dog snapping at his heels. Further and further away from the den Jupiter ran, drawing the dog with him until it was staggering with exhaustion. At last, Jupiter left the dog behind, panting in the dust. Though shaken by this encounter, the wolf continued for his hunt for food. He knew he must take something back for Kibero and the cubs. After securing his third mole rat, Jupiter at last began the long walk back to the den. Kibera was waiting impatiently for him to return. Minding the pups was a tiring business, and she was hungry. As Jupiter came into sight, she knew that he would be bringing a tasty morsel and ran to greet him. The puppies followed eagerly. As each pack member returned to the den, they were each greeted by others in a similar fashion. Juno inspected her young pups and affectionately ran her tongue over their soft fur as they settled down to suckle. Jupiter was glad to be back within the safety of the den. The encounter with the dog had been unsettling, even though he had come to no harm. Tucking his nose beneath his paws, he settled down, along with the other members of the pack, to sleep. Back at their camp, Claudio and his team were collecting drugs and medical equipment ready to visit the village elders the following day. They knew that time was short if they were to save the wolves, and they badly needed to persuade the people of the highlands to help them. For many months they had been visiting the village after village, explaining the danger of rabies and what it could mean for the wolves, explaining what needed to be done to prevent the disease spreading yet further through the countryside. But all too often the elders thought only of the wolves as a nuisance, rather than creatures that needed to be taken care of. Gradually, though, Claudia and his team members were able to help convince the people that something had to be done to save the wolves. They explained how they fed only on grass rats and mole rats, not sheep, keeping these small creatures under control so that they did not become a pest to the villagers. They explained how the wolves, like the other animals of the highlands, were part of the village's heritage, part of their native land and their history, a part that should be protected rather than destroyed. And so the next day dawned, and the wolf watchers set off to resume their task, hoping that today they might have a chance to put their plan to save the wolves into action. When they entered the first village, they were greeted by the village elders and sat down to share beakers of hot, strong coffee. Claudio explained again that the rabies were in danger of spreading. He asked them if they had not noticed what was happening to their own cattle dogs, and could tell by their reaction they too had witnessed the devastating effects of the disease. The elders listened intently as he explained that the only hope for the wolves and the dogs was the disease to be attacked at the source. "We must vaccinate your cattle dogs," explained Claudio. "Then we will be safe from the disease and no longer capable of passing it on to the wolves." Once they had listened to what Claudio had to say, the elders talked for some time amongst themselves. At last, one spokesman came forward. "We agree to your plan," he said. "If you wish to start now, we'll begin to collect and round up our dogs." Claudio and his team were delighted. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for so long. Soon they had vaccinated all the dogs in the first village and were ready to move on. There was still much work to be done. As the days passed, the wolf watchers moved from village to village, spreading the message and stopping the spread of the killer disease. High above them, amongst the peace of the mountains, Kibera woke and proudly looked around her family. Thanks to the wolf watchers and their work, life for Jupiter and his pack would carry on as normal, and Kibera could still look forward to mothering her own pups. As the ritual morning howl echoed across the plateau, Claudio reflected on the fact that for the first time, being at last, this particular pack of wolves was safe from at least one real danger, and the other villages to visit and the wolves to save. He knew all too well that the future of the Ethiopian wolf was still uncertain. So, for now, Claudio and his team would carry on watching, even if the wolves do think that they're just being nosy. The end. Sleep tight and don't let the bed bugs bite.